This episode is brought to you by the Brody's Tennis Invitational.
If you've been glued to your screen watching all the action from SW19 and it's inspired you to get out there and watch some live tennis yourself, then the Brody's Tennis Invitational is your perfect post-Wimbledon fix.
Live from the heart of Edinburgh City Centre at the Edinburgh International Conference Centre from the 28th to the 30th of September, this three-day tennis tournament combines world-class tennis talent with Scotland's rising tennis stars.
And this year's event features not one, not two, but three Grand Slam finalists, including
Feliciano Lopez,
Johanna Konta,
Mark Philippoussis,
Marcos Baghdatis,
Greg Rosetsky,
Ali Collins, and fresh from her incredible run to the Wimbledon quarterfinals, Maya Lumsden.
And if a day or weekend trip to Edinburgh for some top quality tennis doesn't sound enticing enough, we also have a very special offer for Tennis Weekly listeners.
Yes, that's right. If you use our exclusive code WEEKLY10, you'll receive 10% off all tickets. That's WEEKLY10 for 10% off your tickets.
Tickets start at £55. Go to brodysinvitational.com for more information. And to purchase your tickets now, the link is in the description.
Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Wimbledon semi-finals catch-up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Djokovic sets up Alcaraz showdown.
Jabeur ready for Vondrousova test.
And Neil Skupski makes the Wimbledon men's doubles final.
Chris, today is the 14th of July and we are here to catch up on the semi-finals of Wimbledon. We now know our finalists. We have Ons Jabeur, Marketa Vondrousova for the women, and Novak Djokovic, Carlos Alcaraz for the men. And I'm not going to lie, I was full of hope, I think, going into the semi-finals, particularly the men's semi-finals. And of course, we're going to be catching up on all the action over the last couple of days. But did those men's semi-finals, did they live up to expectation?
They did not, unfortunately. They were over in a flash. I mean, you were on centre court, obviously, to watch the Sabalenka-Jabeur match, and that was the pick of the semi-finals, really, in terms of what happened in that match. That was excellent. So, Joel, if I was picking one of the four, I think you went to the best one.
Yeah, it was. It was a little bit of a letdown, wasn't it? The men's semi-finals, particularly, I think, Medvedev Alcaraz, which we'll get on to, because that was a straight sets affair, and I just did not think that was going to be that straightforward for Carlos Alcaraz.
Yeah, I didn't either. I was looking at the scores and I was watching some of it, and every time you thought maybe like there's a break back, there's a little hiccup coming, there was none. And having seen him play against some of the other players he's played this week, you thought Medvedev would put up more resistance, but it was a very surprising result, and it seems a little bit like we just had to get through the semi-finals to get to the epic final. You know?
Exactly. We're going to be previewing the men's final and the women's final, actually. And I mean, I'm already kind of... Well, we've been in this situation before, French Open semi-finals, and that also probably, if we're being honest, didn't really live up to all the hype. So I'm just hoping, that final does deliver. But we're going to be talking about the two men's semi-finals first of all, and we're going to start with Novak Djokovic, Jannik Sinner. Djokovic came through this in straight sets, 6-3, 6-4, 7-6. Won yet another tie-break. In all honesty, Sinner should have probably pushed it to a fourth. He had chances in that third set, but alas, Novak Djokovic is just playing tennis that is... It's just on another level, or a few more levels above what Jannik Sinner can deliver.
Yeah, and it's not even just his tennis is on another level. It also feels like there's something kind of guiding him through. In the times when it gets very close, it's almost like there's some sort of like divine intervention that happens where it means that the person he's playing sort of misses a few shots and he somehow turns around these situations that looks like it could get a bit dicey. And in that third set, there were chances for Sinner, and it almost just feels like no matter what happens, Novak Djokovic will still come through
win
those
in
sets.
Three.
Yeah, it really did feel like that. And or if Djokovic did want to play a fourth, then they play a fourth. But it feels like it's very much up to him to decide in terms of what level he brings. And we saw that in the Rublev match where his level wasn't as high in the first set. and quite often he's then able to elevate it and basically win a straight sets match after that. But for Sinner in this one, I thought at least he did put in a much better showing in the third set. He didn't play badly by any measure. I think he hit, a lot of winners. He had a positive winner differential, 44 winners, 35 unforced errors. And it just kind of makes you think, a bit like that Hurkacz match, it's when you hit the winners, it's when you make the errors that it really matters. And Djokovic doesn't make errors at important moments.
Particularly on those break points as well, because Sinner, I will say he did create opportunities for himself, particularly in those opening games. I was seeing him eke his way into the Djokovic service games, and I was like, oh, have we got a bit of a competition going on here? And he manufactured 6 break points, but they were all saved by Djokovic. And I just think in those moments, Sinner, he did not play the big points well. He almost felt quite nervous. He almost knew what he had to do, and he went for a little bit extra, and it always sort of ended up in shot going wide, shot going long, and he sort of just led to this sort of inevitable conclusion that no matter what Jannik Sinner was going to do, no matter what situation he was going to find himself in, Novak Djokovic was ultimately going to prosper in the end.
Yeah, and I think it's that thing it must be in your head when you're playing, that Novak Djokovic doesn't give you many chances. And it's a similar thing for the Hurkacz match as well, where when you have those moments that it's such a hard line as to whether do you go for more, do you dial it back? He's not going to miss. And so if you know that Djokovic isn't going to miss in those important moments, you're not going to get a freebie. You have to make something happen. And that's a very different way of playing a point, especially on break point, because you've got to do something special, and making that happen instantly is really difficult. And in terms of the serving display from Djokovic, he hit 11 aces and 0 double faults. He's only been broken 3 times in this entire tournament, and the fewest times he's been broken on a run to a slam is 5. So getting to this point, he's serving and has some of the best service stats that he's ever had in his career, leading up to a Grand Slam final. Yeah,
and it feels like even if everything wasn't stacked in Novak Djokovic's favour, the roof being on, I think, certainly helps. It was on for this semi-final.
It's been on for every match, really.
It has, actually. It's felt like that.
He's played an indoor tournament for Wimbledon.
Effectively, he has, hasn't he? And the weather forecast is a little bit iffy for tomorrow, so it remains to be seen if the men's final will be under a roof, but you would certainly think that favours Novak Djokovic. Talking about Jannik Sinner, the last time they played, he was 2 sets up on Djokovic and lost in 5 sets, and it was a much closer and tighter affair. What do you think Jannik Sinner needs to do in order to get to a Grand Slam final, to be competitive against someone like a Novak Djokovic? When me and Kim were speaking about this in terms of Rublev and Djokovic, Kim was basically like, he just needs to wait until Djokovic retires. What's your view on Sinner? Is he in that category, or do you genuinely believe that he has the tools to defeat Djokovic at a Grand Slam?
I think I'm with Kim on this, unfortunately, in terms of he needs a better draw. The draw cannot have Novak Djokovic in. And I think, unfortunately for Sinner, he does come up against some of the players who are playing the best tennis. That's the nature of the draw as you move through. The US Open, he was up against Alcaraz. We've seen him up against lots of players, and it might not be 2 sets to love, or this was 2 sets to 1 for Alcaraz Sinner. I remember in that one, and he did sort of bow out, having really, he should have won that one as well. And it comes down to the fact that he's got the tennis, he's got the game, but he isn't necessarily, at this point in time, the ultimate match player. And there's a few players, like the Nadals, where he's managed to put in a great showing, and that's what I think he does. He tends to put in a good showing. But this year, I think it's a different Novak Djokovic. And we talked about this in Australia, we talked about it in Paris. He is leads ahead of the rest of the field. So a very tough one for him, because I do think that if he were to play against Alcaraz, he would have had more chances. But at the same time, Alcaraz, from seeing him play on centre court, I think there are a couple of players that Sinner wouldn't be able to beat at a major this year. But now you've heard what Kim and I think, Joel, but what do you think in terms of Sinner?
Yeah, it's tough. I think, he's got such effortless power, and there are times where the sound of the ball when it comes off the racket from him on an indoor court, it just feels so explosive. And I think from an ability point of view, I certainly feel like he's got the tools to make it a Grand Slam final. But do I think he has the belief? And the number of times he's lost at, the quarterfinal stage, the number of times like he's lost to Novak Djokovic at Wimbledon, I just think that he doesn't necessarily have the confidence that he can actually do it and that he actually believes. And it must be demoralizing when you make these opportunities and you're trying to have that positive mindset to really kind of stem the tide and prove the haters wrong. It must be so frustrating when you're just not able to eke those moments. And I think it will come eventually, but I do think it almost needs to be maybe a mindset change in terms of, and perhaps maybe the decision making on those big points, because he didn't necessarily need to go for as much as he did to I feel like get those breaks. And I feel like once he may have got one of those, he would have been in business, I think. And it's a few things, but I think they're maybe like minute things, but they are things that I think make a world of difference at this stage of a tournament.
So do you think, based on kind of that answer, I feel like he's falling into the Medvedev camp of when he will get a slam? It might be a little bit later. It might not be as early as people thought, but maybe he will be a player who does push on, and maybe it's a US Open, maybe it is a Wimbledon, but it might not be kind of the rivalry that he's been billed as with Carlos Alcaraz, the two of them, and maybe Holger Rune will be cleaning up the next 60 Grand Slams or something like that.
And I think he does have tremendous like maturity and temperament on the court, which I think really counts for something at this stage of Grand Slams, where he handles the occasion. He doesn't let the situation get on top of him. That's his demeanor on the court. We don't really see him berate the umpire or get into arguments or throw his racket. And I think having that calmness does help him. But at the same time, when you do look at it against Novak Djokovic, you're sort of wondering, like, does he need to change it up? Because it's not worked for him so far. Is there a little bit more fire and passion that maybe he needs to outwardly show and express that could maybe bring a different type of sinner to the court that can help him get over the gain line? Because we saw that with Ons Jabeur, I feel. She talked about the old Ons would have lost that match against Arina Sabalenka. And I think Jannik Sinner is like, he's still in that old Sinner mode, and he needs to think about what's the new Sinner going to be that is going to let me get to a Grand Slam final for the first time. Yeah,
I love that. And I think what On said, and I think in terms of the passion, maybe he can harness some of the passion from the Carota boys, because they're certainly passionate about him.
Yeah. I love they did like a little montage in terms of what does Jannik Sinner need to do to beat Novak Djokovic, and it was like a little I saw one of them was like doing some exercise, doing some weights, and just thought it was,
needs to make some gains, the Carota boys are saying. Goodness, so they're now going to become part coaches, part commentators, so watch out.
I know. I mean, it was great to see them. I think they just add so much, and it's I'm hoping we'll see more of them as the tour goes on. I mean, we have to talk about Novak Djokovic and two moments in particular during the match, because as much as Jannik Sinner did put up a fight, there were at times when I thought Novak Djokovic was in a battle with the umpire Richard Haig, and this has caused a lot of debate amongst tennis fans. The hindrance call against him during the match, it felt like everyone in the crowd were surprised and a little bit shocked by it on the point when it happened. Novak Djokovic, you could see, was bubbling and steaming, I think, a little bit inside. What did you make of it? Because we don't often get hindrance calls. I don't think we've ever had actually a hindrance call against Novak Djokovic in such a high profile match and at such a high profile moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all very everyone was surprised by it. No one saw it coming particularly, and it didn't actually appear to hinder anyone. I know that's not the point of what hindrance is and what the rule is. It was more just an elongated noise. And I think when it comes to this, it's one where when you're playing in a big match, I personally wouldn't have made the call if I was the umpire, because I actually think then the hindrance is actually coming from the umpire, in the sense that something that wasn't necessarily a big thing has become a bigger thing. And I think a lot of umpires don't call things when they should. So again, I think consistency with umpiring, because I don't think that many umpires would have called this.
I mean, Yannick Sinner got the ball back in play very easily, so it was a little bit awkward. He called hindrance, and then you would think, well, if he called that, then Sinner might have been affected. Might not have been able to get the shot back in, but he comfortably made it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when we have seen it before, where it has been hindrance. So, for example, there was a very famous one. If you cast your mind back to the slam that Sam Stosur won in 2011. Serena Williams hit an absolute rocket of a forehand, and she celebrated as soon as she hit it. Could Sam Stosur have got it? No, of course she couldn't. It would have taken down like a barn door. It was hit so hard. But the fact that she made the noise, I thought that felt like hindrance, because you can't celebrate too early. And although that was a tough call, it was a good one. I think when called hindrance, it's something that everyone knows on the court. Like Sinner would know, the player would know. Another one with Serena, with Venus in a Wimbledon final. Serena made a noise, and Venus and Serena both accepted it. But the fact they made the decision, not the umpire, because Venus decided she was hindered by it. And so I think with this one, it just feels so unnecessary. So I do think I'm on the John McEnroe school of thought that maybe he wanted to get his name in the paper. Because I really don't understand why he said anything at all. Yeah,
I thought that was actually quite a comment I actually agree with. From John McEnroe.
First time for everything.
Yeah, it felt out of place. It didn't feel right, and I don't think it was completely necessary. And we certainly don't see similar types of grunts that are extended get called. I think about like Arina Sabalenka. I feel like she does it most points. Alexander Bublik in that Andrei Rublev match, when he hit that miracle shot. Yeah,
he celebrated it.
Yeah, the double-handed backhand that Bublik hit, he hit it with an extended grunt. I dread to think that Richard Haig probably would have called that hindrance, so we wouldn't have got the miracle shot that Rublev got back. So again, it comes down, I think, to consistency, and that's what makes, I think, this so surprising and so shocking. I mean, it's interesting. Taylor Fritz has come out on social media and had some things to say about it. He said, "I can't speak to this specific instance because I didn't see it. Novak doesn't come to my mind when I think of this rule, but some players I can think of extend/delay grunts a lot on big points to put you off, and it needs to be called more by umpires." So he thinks it should be we should be hearing hindrance more on the tour for these extended grunts. Do you agree with that, or do you think that actually it's a bit OTT?
I think when it comes to grunting, it's very difficult to decide where a grunt ends and what is a natural sort of exhale. So I think it would have to be done in a way that would almost say that you couldn't really grunt, or your grunt had to finish before your opponent hit the ball. That tends to be the rule as well, of thumb. I think umpires should make a lot more calls. I think we kind of allowed the game to become this sort of crazy TV spectacle where you kind of you're making the noises for the effort, and I think that's kind of the challenge with it, would be how do you school that? So if there isn't a consistent rule, and if it isn't able to be used consistently, then I think only use it for the exceptions, and I did not feel this was an exception.
Yeah, exactly. And we had this battle, I think, between Novak Djokovic and the umpire, and at times we also had, I think, a battle between Novak Djokovic and the crowd, because you sense the crowd just wanted a match. They wanted it to be competitive. They wanted it to go long, and as a result, when Djokovic was down or facing break points against his serve, we saw moments where they were like, I hope, basically saying, I hope you double fault, or they're applauding an error. And Djokovic took this in, was aware of it, and I think he gave a thumbs up and applauded at one moment, and then came back, won the game on his serve, and then did kind of a crying sort of emotion to the crowd. What did you make of this? Because to me, I was just like, the crowd have just stirred the pot even more. And it's like, I know what you're trying to do, but it's having the complete opposite effect.
I thought it was genuine emotion from Novak Djokovic. I thought he was genuinely crying on court. He was super sad at how badly this match was going for him. But yeah, it's a funny one, I think. Obviously, players want a match, but I do think that Djokovic doesn't deserve that at all, given the performances that he's had. How he is obviously the GOAT And I think it's fine to cheer people on, but I think at Wimbledon this year there's been a little bit foul of that in terms of really hoping, whether it's Tsitsipas against a Brit or whoever it is, we shouldn't be kind of cheering double faults, and you can really rally players and really cheer them on. But I do think that doesn't have to come at like one of the greats' expenses, because I just don't think it was really necessary. And also, as you say, Djokovic, it kind of seemed to inspire him even more to get the job done, to make the
Didn't
point.
we learn this from Djokovic Federer all those years ago in that Grand Slam final?
Yeah, I think we did. But then at the same time, it's like, why is he so aware of it? You know, I always imagined he would be like super serene in the zone. Like, he's done all of his sort of meditation, and he's just not aware of it. But I guess it does get to you, and you do hear it. Even Novak Djokovic does, and he's human. Turns out.
I think he wants to hear it, because, as I said, I think it provides it provides fuel.
Loves the drama.
Provides motivation, and it spurs him on. And I don't think we're going to hear the last of it, to be honest. In the in the men's final, I do think.
Were they
also,
Djokovic supporters though, Joel? Is that the conspiracy you're saying?
Well,
his
I
fans
don't know.
If you.
Well,
if you
that's
do
a good. Yeah. That's a funny way to look at it.
Reverse psychology.
We could be reverse psychology. I mean, I do think also it's just testament to how good Novak Djokovic is, in terms of like, people are like almost like actively like trying to put him off, clap, irk him, to make a match of it, just because of the levels he's bringing to the court. So yeah, it was interesting. It's always fascinating, I think, with Wimbledon, because this is one of his homes, alongside, I'd say, Rod Laver Arena, and he hasn't lost on centre court for a decade, but it still doesn't feel like he gets the respect that he deserves.
Yeah, I'm over that now from people. I think people need to fully get on board the Djokovic.
Yeah. I think we're just going to miss him. I know he's like, you love to hate him, but we're going to, you deep down know we're going to be missing him when he's gone.
Oh, yeah, and when I got to watch him twice this Wimbledon, I was elated to have him on the billing, because what he does on the court is incredible. And whether you think he's your favourite of the big three or whatever, I would just always rather have one of the big three playing in a tournament for as long as possible. And people need to understand that it doesn't take anything away from anyone else's achievements, and what Djokovic has done deserves a lot of respect.
Exactly, and he will be going for his 8th Wimbledon singles title.
It's amazing.
I know, could equal Roger Federer. In his way will be Carlos Alcaraz, who came through against Daniil Medvedev. This was another straight sets job, 6-3, 6-3, 6-3. Now, what was quite interesting to me for this was they had played at Wimbledon before in 2021, 2 years ago, and the result in that match was straight sets to Daniil Medvedev. So a complete role reversal 2 years later. Were you surprised by the result, or... Well, actually, two questions. Were you surprised by the result, and were you surprised by the scoreline?
I wasn't surprised by the result, because I had been reading quite a lot about the matchup and why this was a very bad matchup for Medvedev in terms of the way that Carlos was able to play. So for me, it felt like it would be a tough one, but I was genuinely surprised by the fact that it was, 3-3-3. I mean, that was, if someone said 9 games, I said, well, maybe he'll get 9 games in the first 2 sets. It'll be much, much closer. And so I think for many people who were watching or had tickets, I think we spoke about this in terms of this match, especially at 1 hour 50. That is exactly what they needed almost on the schedule and on the billing for Wimbledon earlier in the tournament, so they could get through the matches. But it does feel like when we get to this stage of the major, that Carlos and Novak are kind of leagues above in the tennis they can put on display. So I was surprised, but not surprised in terms of the overall result. But surely you were surprised by the scoreline as well, because I think we were messaging thinking this is going to be over really quickly.
Yes, I know. I thought we were going to go much later than we did, and a lot of talk around, I think, Daniil Medvedev and his court positioning on a grass court, and this idea that you just can't stand as far back as he does on a grass court and expect to win, particularly against an aggressive attacking player like Carlos Alcaraz. He's the world number one. He knows how he can take the initiative in the rally, and I thought Alcaraz actually, his return game was exceptional against Medvedev. One of his biggest weapons is his serve, but it was completely nullified, I think, against the Alcaraz return. But what do you think on Medvedev in terms of what he needs to do to sort of close the gap with Alcaraz? Because I just think he came onto the court and sort of was going to just try and play it like he's played it, all the way through the tournament. And he almost needed to change his game plan up, but we just got the same Medvedev in terms of, I'm just going to try and rally from the baseline, stay in the point as long as possible. And I just don't feel like you can do that against someone like Carlos Alcaraz.
Yeah, I think maybe he was a little bit defeated before he got on the court, because it is such a bad matchup as we kind of described, and especially when Alcaraz is able to move so quickly, he can be aggressive, and he finished so many points at the net, which is something that when you think about Alcaraz and probably that match that they played in 2021, you wouldn't necessarily think that he was a player that likes to finish at the net. So he was able to set up the points so that he actually finished at the net 36 times, and he won 28 of those points.
Well, it's because Medvedev was so deep. He was like, hang on, I'm going to take the initiative here. I'm going to come in and close off the point.
You have to move up the court. And so I think that's something which is genuinely really impressive, with the way that he was able to not only cover the most ground in terms of he actually did move more and retrieve more balls, but he was also able to really kind of play aggressive front foot, move forward, move up the court. And it would be the blueprint for playing Medvedev on grass. You'd watch this match back and think, right, this is what I've got to do. And for Medvedev on grass in future, I think he'll probably keep doing what he does, because a semi-final at Wimbledon, his best result here, it's a good result. There's nothing to be kind of sniggered upon at. I think it's very impressive he made it, but I don't think he really thought he was in contention for the title, and that kind of showed.
Yeah, and I would like to see him, be a bit closer to the baseline. I think I saw a video actually of him actually trying to return serve when he did step in closer to the baseline, and he just wasn't able to do it. He's, as I said, I almost think he's like too comfortable from being like, so far back behind the baseline that it's almost like that's one way, and yes, you're really good at it, but that way is not going to work for absolutely every tennis player on the tour. And when you get up to this level against someone like Carlos Alcaraz, it's a bad matchup. So I think he needs to change his dynamic. But Carlos Alcaraz is through. He is now going to be the fourth youngest Wimbledon men's singles finalist in the Open era. So very impressive from that front. Are you surprised at all of him getting to a grass court Grand Slam final, given he's still a relative novice on the surface? Yes, he did win Queens in the build-up, but are you surprised he's been able to kick on and get to his first ever Wimbledon final? Or at the same time, you're like, well, this just shows how talented he is, regardless of what surface he's on? Yeah,
I think that's so true, that not everyone would have thought this, because his game is built for clay. It is, and but is it though? Is it like, are we just thinking that because he's Spanish and we just, that's how his game would have grown and developed. So I think that's kind of what I was going to go on to say, is that how much he's been able to adapt it for the different surfaces, which I think we talk about players who can adapt. Medvedev is obviously one. He's not the king of adapting. He's the king kind of adapting his shots to play them for 9 meters behind the baseline, 9 feet, behind the baseline. And I think that's something which even kind of Djokovic has said is so impressive about him, is that, many people wouldn't have expected him to play so well on grass because of the fact that his game is kind of built for slower courts. But he's so good at adapting his game to the challenges of his opponents and of the surface. And I think that's the key with someone like Alcaraz. He's obviously put the time in when it comes to his movement on the surface, because he is moving so well this year. But also in terms of his opponents, he does figure out the way to play them on the day. So I think when you combine that sort of winner's mentality, he's able to do that. I think it's really impressive to see how he's able to kind of meet those challenges. And for me, having seen him at Queens, I'm not surprised he was in the final. I believe I put him in the final, Joel. I believe you might have put a certain Holger Rune.
Okay.
So finally, some predictions are working
Finally,
out for me.
Some predictions are working for you, yes.
Yeah,
we're going to get, obviously, Djokovic, Alcaraz. We had that, what I would say was a false start in that French Open semi-final. I just hope Alcaraz doesn't cramp and we get like a match where, we can see both of them fully go toe-to-toe with each other in a best-of-5 set format. And you've got the added incentive as well, maybe a little bit less of an incentive for Djokovic, but the world number 1 ranking is also going to be on the line. So
calendar Grand Slam. is on the line.
Oh, calendar Grand Slam is online. There's a lot at stake here, isn't there? Do you think like these extra things are gonna add pressure to the moment, or do you think they're just gonna be able to kind of go on and just be uninhibited and play their best tennis?
I think for Alcaraz in the French Open, when you are in that situation and you think about what's the best case, what's the worst case scenario, in many ways, what happened from a nerves perspective was the worst case scenario. And I actually think it's probably quite freeing for him in terms of the fact that that has now happened, and you have to bring about a way that it won't happen again. But also, that was all fine still. He made the semi-finals there. He's now in another final. That isn't anything more than an isolated event right now. So I actually think it will be different. And the fact that this is obviously Djokovic's home court, and the expectations are low for Alcaraz in this situation. Everyone expects Novak Djokovic to win. Whereas I think that match at the French Open, people were 50-50. And that makes it very different, I think, because he is the underdog. He is the number one and the underdog against someone who has done this so many times before. So I just think the pressure is on Djokovic if he feels pressure, which I'm not sure he does.
Well, I'm going to ask you for your prediction in a sec, but I want to, before I just get onto that, I do need to address a news story that came up a few days ago. The talk of Carlos Alcaraz's dad filming and videoing Novak Djokovic training sessions. What do you make of this? Is this like Spygate, or like, is this like genuinely trying to get a competitive advantage if it happened? Or is this just a bit like Carlos Alcaraz's dad is a big Djokovic fan and he just wants to see his tennis and relive it? I'm not really sure, but yeah, where do you stand on like kind of family members from other camps taking videos of other players that they may face in the future?
I think with the practicing, that is a little bit odd because a lot of discussions will happen about tactics, how someone's feeling, and you want players in those situations to be able to communicate openly without kind of thinking there are spies around in that sense. But it's not unusual, I don't think, to check out a practice session in terms of the way that the courts and practice sessions are set up. It's either on one of the courts of Wimbledon or it's on the practice courts, and they're all next to each other. So you might overhear something, you might see something. So I don't think it's that bad. I think either way, I think it's trying to get a little bit desperate, maybe I'd say, if you think that recording
yeah, exactly.
a practice
Everything
session
is conspiring against Djokovic. The umpires, the fans,
people in the bush.
Carlos Alcaraz's dad
is in the bushes, maybe, you know, trying to find out what goes into that magic drink that he had, you know.
Well, I mean, the final is going to be on Sunday. I am now going to ask you for your prediction. Who is winning and in how many sets?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I do think there's going to be a chance for Carlos, but I have to say Djokovic in 3. I really do.
Djokovic in 3! Wow. I wasn't expecting the number 3 to turn up there.
Well, I just think that the difficulty is it is those, if you get to a tie break, I'm not sure he's going to break him particularly much. He might break him a couple of times, but I do think that Djokovic also is one of the best returners ever. And so I just think if you get to a tie break, who would my money be on? It'd be on Djokovic. So I could see a couple of tie breaks in there. I think it's going to be very difficult for him. I don't know. What about you, Joel?
Djokovic in 3. No.
About to say, yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah. No, I'm going to say Djokovic in 5. I think
5. Oh, that would be epic if that happens.
I know, that would be epic, right? Maybe I'm just like
under the roof. The roof, remember?
I think the roof might have a big factor at play. I think it might be more comfortable for Djokovic if the roof is on. So that remains to be seen. But yeah, I think we're going to get. Well, I think we're going to get a much better match, I think, than that French Open semi-final. And yeah, I still got to go with, ultimately in the end, I still got to go with Djokovic. He's only dropped 2 sets en route to the final. He's been serving great. He's got the history as well of the court. It's just so hard to not back him, despite how well Alcaraz is playing. So yeah, we will wait and see. But we've also got from a British point of view, we've got Neil Skupski in the men's doubles final. They're going to be facing Zeballos and Marcel Granollers of Spain in Saturday's final on centre court. Neil Skupski's never won a men's doubles Grand Slam title. And I didn't realise this, Chris. His brother, Ken, can't be there because he booked a holiday to Ibiza.
I mean, I hope he's having a wonderful time, but I think this might not necessarily be the best thing that you could do from a brotherly perspective. But I believe he also helps with his coaching, so I'm not sure why you thought second week of Wimbledon, there's no way that Neil's going to make it. Let's get some flights to Ibiza. So doesn't say that they have faith in you, does it?
That's commitment to clubbing, right? But I mean, just very quickly, Skupski and Koolhof, do you think they can? I mean, they are the top seeds, and I mean, Zeballos and Granollers, they are very, 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 very handy doubles team. But on the grass courts of Wimbledon, you'd think maybe the South Americans are maybe at a little bit of a disadvantage to someone like a Skupski and a Koolhof.
Yeah, and Skupski's obviously won a couple of mixed titles here as well, so he's very much at home. Personally, I'm a Bopana and Ebden fan, so they did take them out to reach the final. So I would say I'm going to support the players that beat them, so that it was worthwhile and makes that even more impressive from Rohan Bopana.
Well, we're gonna see. We've got at least we've got some British interest in the doubles final. I feel like we just have a conveyor belt, don't we, of really good men's doubles players,
just
don't we?
Slot someone into a mixed or a men's doubles final. There's always going to be a Brit somewhere.
There's always going to be someone there, exactly. But yes, Good luck to Neil Skupski and Wesley Koolhof. We're going to take a quick break now, but join us in the second half where Joel and Kim will be taking a look back on all the action from the women's semi-finals. So do not go anywhere.
Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. And now we're going to move on to look back at the ladies' semi-finals from yesterday. Chris is actually now transformed into Joel.
He's disappeared. He's disappeared.
Joel's
hello, listeners. Hello, everyone.
Hello from the past. This is recorded on Thursday night. But Joel, you were at the Sabalenka Jabeur semi. So I think that is the natural place to begin. And this was really the match of the day because it was a 3-setter, quite a lot of ups and downs. Jabeur coming back from losing that first set to win and make a second straight final here at Wimbledon.
Who would have thought? No one was thinking. I know we weren't thinking Marketa Vondrousova was going to get to a Grand Slam singles final at Wimbledon, but I don't think we were expecting Ons Jabeur to repeat what she did last year.
Yeah, I feel like the 2 slam finals she reached last year, I think because she'd struggled a bit this season, I think maybe we thought that they were sort of compartmentalised, that maybe this wasn't her year. But I'm really impressed with how she's reacted and gone deep, to the final. Maybe she's going to, right the wrongs of last year and get the job done. And because she said, today, the old me would have lost this match today. Yeah. So she's clearly learnt from her experience last year, that final with Rybakina, and she's put that into practice. So yeah, she was a set and 4-2 down. So what did you see from Jabeur to pull the match back and win it?
And she was 4-2 down in the tie. Sorry, she was 4-2 up in that first set tiebreaker as well. And it was always, I think, going to be a judgment of how she responded to losing that first set, given she was up in the tiebreak. And when she went 4-2 down in that second set, I thought, the writing's on the wall here, because she does, I think, get down on herself. And when she gets into that sort of negative mood on the court, when she's sort of moping about, walking from side to side, not the most positive character on the court, it can get away from her really, really quickly. So I think it was just the mindset that she had, and I think it was very positive, and I think that's really hard to do when you've got someone like Sabalenka dropping these bombs from her serve across the net. It must be so frustrating when there are so many cheap points from aces and unreturned serves. You're thinking, like, when's my opportunity going to come? am I going to get those breakpoint moments? And I think it was just making sure that from Jabeur's point of view, she was patient, she didn't rush it, and she just backed herself and had that belief that I will get these moments at some point. And when she did go 4-2 down in that second set, with the crowd on her side, she roared back.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely a fan favourite, and especially, you know, with the Wimbledon crowd here fully behind her. I expect in the final they're going to be behind Ons as well. And, you know, she's beaten, you know, we're talking about Svitolina's path to the final, but to the semi-final, sorry. But Ons Jabeur, to get to now a final, she's had to beat a lot of Grand Slam champions on the way as well. Andreescu, Kvitova, Rybakina, Sabalenka. That is a tough draw, you know, including Wimbledon champions in there as well. So I just think, you know, this was yet another showing of how well she has, you know, raised her game from those early rounds and just shown such tenacity to come through. And what do you think Sabalenka, you know, looking back from her perspective, where would she be thinking, that's where I went wrong? You know, what will she be learning from this match?
I think she'll be disappointed that she wasn't able to close it from a set and 4-2 up. It really was on her racket, and I think she was getting frustrated with herself. I was getting, you talk about the old Ons Jabeur, you know, would have lost that match. I think felt at times in that second set that we saw the old Arina Sabalenka. I was almost kind of waiting for her to erupt on the court, because she was getting a lot more frustrated, a lot more tense. There are a lot more stern stares to her player box. And I think she just let the situation get to her, and she wasn't able to handle, I think, Ons Jabeur playing lights out tennis. And if you put that on the flip side, I think Ons Jabeur was much better at handling Sabalenka and almost accepting, right, you're going to play great tennis, and fine, if that's going to win you all these points, I can't do much about it, but I'm going to make the most of those moments where maybe your level dips. And I think with Sabalenka, she let Jabeur's peak level in that second set really get at her, and to me that was the beginning of her downfall.
And a bit of an interesting decision by Wimbledon to close the roof as well. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it was a bit of a funny one. It was, I'm not gonna lie, it was almost like we were in a greenhouse inside. I know that there were chances of showers, but the fact that this match went a full 3 sets, I don't think there was any showers, there was any rain. I think it was a little bit disappointing, to be honest, that it was played under the roof. It does create a really noisy atmosphere, I'm not going to lie, inside, and to be part of that is so much fun. And you know, Ons Jabeur just, you know, brings out the best, I think, in crowds. And you know, I've got to say, you know, Sabalenka as well, she is a fiery character on the court, but I still think that the crowds do appreciate that and do get behind her. But certainly, yeah, with the roof closed, I just don't think this was a match that should have been played with the roof on. If we're going back to that talk on, you know, Wimbledon's an outdoor tournament and we should be playing without a roof at every single opportunity, well then why on earth are we playing this ladies semi-final with the roof on?
Yeah, it does seem a bit questionable, given last week arguably they weren't closing the roof when they should have done, and this week it's the other way around. I mean, you mentioned like Sabalenka and still getting some support from the crowd. One of the things we mentioned previously was that if she were to find herself in the final, you know, there might be some awkward moments should her opponent be Svitolina, but in reality, neither of them are in the final. It's the other way around, because Ons Jabeur will be playing against Marketa Vondrousova come Saturday in the final. So let's look at that first semi-final of the day. Vondrousova up against Svitolina. This match was a lot quicker than the second semi and a bit more straightforward. Straight set 6-3, 6-3 for Vondrousova. At one point, it was looking like it was going to be a bit of a rout, because Vondrousova had a point for 5-love in that second set. But Svitolina did so well to kind of peg the set back, didn't she, to 4-3. And do you know what? I was wondering, is this going to be the start of a comeback?
Yeah. Is this going to be a comeback? But no. Yeah, it was a step too far for Alina Svitolina. I think it's interesting if you look at her path. You would say in all of her matches up to this point, she was going in as the underdog, and that favoured her. She was upset after upset, but in this match against Vondrousova, she was arguably going in as the slight favourite, and it was a completely different story. Her timing was completely off. There were regulation shots that she was quite easily missing, and I was a bit confused. I was a bit flummoxed. I think everyone else in the arena was shocked, and it got away from her so quickly. I don't think she kind of almost had the time to think about, what Vondrousova is doing and how do I combat that, because it was just getting away from her so quickly, and you were just thinking, oh my God, is this going to be over in less than an hour?
Yeah, it was looking very one-way traffic at one point. And I think that did play a part. I think Svitolina would have felt that pressure to, all this hype about this journey she's going on, and also wanting to do it for her country. Inevitably, eventually that's going to get to you. And, she's never been beyond the semi-final of the slam before. So this is like her own duck now. It's she's still not gone any deeper.
Well, I do think that. And I think we've got to remember that the peak Alina Svitolina before taking a break from tennis did have these moments where similarly, maybe it wasn't like quarterfinals, but certainly she's still not made a Grand Slam final, and it's still a barrier, I think, and a hurdle that she needs to overcome. And she had this opportunity against Vondrousova, but I don't know, maybe those previous experiences, she's been in a Wimbledon semi-final before. I think she's also got to a US Open semi-final where she lost to Serena Williams, but she should be doing better, I think, in these big moments. As much as it's hard to kind of obviously begrudge her, I mean, it's still ridiculous getting to a Grand Slam semi-final so early on in your comeback, but there's still that work to be done there, and I think she will take confidence that she could reach a maiden slam final, I think, at some point in the future. But it's almost like there are familiar weaknesses to her game and where she gets to in terms of her Grand Slam run.
Yeah, and I think, regardless of what happened today, she's far exceeded everyone's expectations coming in as a wild card. So she has absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. It's been an amazing tournament. And going back to Vondrousova into her second Grand Slam final, this time last year, she came to London to watch a friend play in qualifying, and Vondrousova had just had wrist surgery. Her wrist was in a cast. She couldn't play for about 6 months last year. So very different story 12 months later. And, she's got her own story. Since she reached that Grand Slam final, she's had 2 surgeries. It's been quite difficult for her. She did get a silver medal at the Olympics, but apart from that, there's been very little kind of highlights. So, she's written her own story here, hasn't she?
Yeah, and I think she's still got a losing record in her career on grass. So to think of the run she's been on, I think she's beaten 4 seeded players en route. She had that fantastic win, I thought, against Jessie Pegula. And I think I was impressed in terms of how she had that wobble, in the second set. And we were thinking, is this Svitolina's chance to capitalise? And the way she responded to that and sort of shut the door on that and closed it out in straight sets, for me was, very impressive, because, she's not been in this situation for a long time, for 4 years when she had that run in Roland Garros. So that to me was impressive, and just the level of tennis that she brought. I mean, I know we can talk about how Svitolina didn't bring her A game to centre court, but Vondrousova was ready to go. You could see that. I think there were she broke Svitolina's serve twice early on. Yes, I think Svitolina got one of those back, but it just showed that she was ready to go, particularly on the Svitolina serve. And when it came to her own service games, she's got a fantastic serve, got her some free points, her forehand as well. It was just a little bit of a different proposition, I think, that Svitolina has maybe been dealing with before, because it's a bit loopier, there's a bit more spin, and I think she was struggling with that contact point and the timing, and as a result, she was just sort of leaking errors in my view. And it's going to be interesting to see how I think Vondrousova goes in a final, but she certainly, I think, got like the variety that maybe an Ons Jabeur has, because she does, bring out the drop shots and the lobs at times. She is a very capable all court player, and it's, I think, just nice to see all those tools in action, given, as you said, the struggles that she's had with her wrists, and the surgeries that she's had in the past.
Yeah, and we know that players who can exhibit a lot of variety have done very well at Wimbledon. Obviously, Jabeur, like the likes of Ash Barty as well. And I think we could be on for a really entertaining final. They're both all-court players and have that kind of variety. And I think Vondrousova as well, I'm quite liking, her style. She's got a lot of tattoos like over her arms, which she describes as art. And I think, it's nice to sort of get her more visibility, because I bet a lot of people coming to Wimbledon, watching Wimbledon, have never heard of her, because if you don't follow tennis all year round, you may not know that she got to the Grand Slam, final 4 years ago. And
I don't think a lot of tennis fans remember that moment. Yeah. It happened so long ago. But yeah, and I also I was reading her. I think her boyfriend was still at home. Great show of support there. Given that there was very little expectation. I think he was on cat sitting duties. I think also her coach said he would get a tattoo if she won the trophy. So I think they're both going to be a little bit hot under the collar at the moment in terms of where Vondrousova is going. But it's just funny how I think we've had, I think, two players who have come into the tournament. There's been probably little expectation on them, maybe obviously a little bit more on Ons Jabeur, but from Vondrousova's point of view, it just shows, I think, when no one's talking about you, it can probably raise your game, and going into these matches as the underdog, it's almost sometimes the better position. And it's really, really worked for Vondrousova so far. And that final will be interesting because she's won the last two matches against Jabeur. And although you maybe would say Jabeur is the favourite, given her Wimbledon run last year and that experience that she can draw upon, Vondrousova's got the know-how to beat Jabeur from this season. Yeah,
she's had 2 wins over her this season, I think both on hard court. Overall in their head-to-head, they're 3-3. Both former Grand Slam finalists. Obviously, Jabeur's been in 2 previous finals, and also, one was at Wimbledon. So I guess the edge with experience there. But I if I was a player, I'd rather be the underdog. I would feel less pressure that way. So, is there an underdog in the final, do you think? Or do you think they're both equal? I think Vondrousova is still the underdog because she's lower ranked. She's actually unseeded. She's the first unseeded women's finalist since 1963, which is actually surprising because I guess it's maybe more of a Wimbledon thing. So we've definitely seen unseeded finalists, at the other slams on the women's side, I'm sure. But it's going to be an interesting one. I think it could certainly be a three-setter. I don't see it being sort of a very one-sided final. I think we're hopefully in for a decent encounter. I would have Vondrousova as the underdog, but I think Jabeur will have a bit more expectation on her because of last year. I think the natural expectation will be, it's her turn now this year. Whether she can rise above that and not let it get to her again. Yeah, and I think she's going to just need to keep that positive mindset that she displayed, I think, against Sabalenka in the semi-finals. I almost want her to not think about that Wimbledon run she had last year in that final, because she came into it and the weight and the expectation, it just dragged her down, and it dragged her level of tennis down. And she should be, I think, thinking about how she played against Sabalenka from 4-2 down in that second set, because it was so impressive in terms of how she dealt with that power and aggression coming back at her. She was fighting power with power at times, and when she brought out the drop shots as well at the net, it really did feel like I'm a woman on a mission here, and that mission is to win my first ever Grand Slam title. Yeah, will it be third time lucky? I mean, Joel, in Tennis Weekly time-honoured fashion, let's make a prediction. Who are you going for your Wimbledon women's singles champion, and how many sets do you think the final's going to be? I'm going to go... I do think it's going to be up and down.
and I think it's going to be Jabeur in 3 sets. I'm hoping and expecting we're going to get a lot of extended rallies. I think it's going to be quite fun. I think they're both known, I think, as baseline players, but I certainly think there's going to be some net points as well. And I think it's going to be a really entertaining tussle that could come down to who handles the occasion better, because both these players have been in this situation before in terms of a Grand Slam final, but both of them have not come out as the victor, and they will be wanting to make the most of this moment, because from Ons Jabeur's point of view, an unseeded player in a ladies singles final, you'd absolutely take that. And from Marketa Vondrousova's point of view, she's probably thinking the same thing, because of all the players she could have maybe thought it might be, Ons Jabeur might not have been one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will see. I think Jabeur is going to be the champion. I'm going either 3 sets, I think, or 2 pretty tight sets. It could be a 7-5, 7-6 job, but hopefully it'll be a fun final. And we didn't see Svitolina get to the singles final. We didn't see a victory for Ukraine in the singles, but we did see a victory for Ukraine in the mixed doubles. The final has happened on a Thursday evening, which I guess is a big change from the traditional schedule.
I was going to ask you about that before we get into this match, which I was there for. What do you make of Grand Slam finals on a Thursday?
I don't like it. I think it's not giving them the sense of occasion. I think it needs to be on the weekend at the very earliest, I think, a Friday night. But I really like the mixed doubles being the Sunday evening, like after the men's final. It's like the last kind of event of the championships. I quite liked that, because it was, often mixed doubles is very fun, a bit frivolous, and it kind of always provided that like nice end to the tournament. But for some reason, I think they did this last year. It's been made earlier in the schedule.
I do not like it one bit, actually. I think it's a bit like, can we just get this out of the way as early as possible? And I think it should be played on the weekend. A Friday night, I think, would be really fun, actually. In terms of atmosphere, it's the start of the weekend. I think that would be a really, really good slot for it. But it feels a little bit underwhelming, I think, playing it so early on, when you're thinking you typically associate finals with the weekend, and to put it on a weekday evening, it doesn't feel prime time enough, given we have had such a boom, I think, with mixed tennis in general over the last few seasons. We've seen how much fans love it. To have it just sort of wheeled out, I think, on Thursday early evening doesn't necessarily feel right to me.
Yeah, and I mean, let's look at what that actually happened in the mixed doubles. So we had Ludmila Kichenok of Ukraine and Mate Pavic of Croatia. They won the title, so it was a pretty close match. 6-4, 6-7, 6-3. They beat Joran Vliegen and Yifan Zhu to win their first, I think, mixed doubles title together. They actually played together 6 years ago, and the physio was sort of like a mutual, I think, contact, and suggested that they play again together.
If I'm the physio, Kim, I'm expecting a bonus there. I'm or like a referral fee. Yeah, I think they played some very, very good tennis throughout. I mean, it was a very entertaining encounter. Pavic and Kichenok, I'm not going to lie, I think they could have maybe got it done in 2 sets. And actually, at the start of that third, I was kind of wondering, had they missed their moment? I think they maybe got a little bit nervous about that at the start of the third set, but they came through in the end. And I think, if I was being really honest, I think they were the better pairing. I think they showed the better tennis. And, Vliegen and Zhu were great. But yeah, Kichenok and Pavic, they were on the same wavelength a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. And Pavic, I think this was his first mixed doubles title here. So it was nice for him to tick that one off at Wimbledon. He's such a experienced, top doubles player. So I think really, really nice for him. And you've got a good bit of doubles to finish off your day on centre court.
And it was nice. And it was nice, I think, to see Ukraine have their moment with Kichenok. I think everyone was looking at Elina Svitolina as the poster child for the Ukraine cause, and we didn't get that moment. But to get it from Kichenok, she was very passionate about that in her speech in the ceremony afterwards, and there was a standing ovation for it around the around centre court, and it was a really poignant moment. So I think it was nice to see that from that perspective, and I do think the Wimbledon organisers will be breathing a sigh of relief that we're not going to be getting Ukraine versus Belarus in that ladies singles final.
Yeah, they've maybe swerved that one, haven't they, in a potentially awkward non-handshake. On that note, that rounds up our pod on the semi-final action from Wimbledon. We'll be back on Sunday night to cap off the finals weekend.
The home stretch. We are on the home stretch, aren't we? But yes, finals action has already happened with the mixed doubles, but we've got plenty of finals action still to come. So listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action still to come from Wimbledon. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok at Tennis Weekly Pod. You can email us on tennisweeklypod@gmail.com, and don't forget to check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back on Sunday at Tennis Weekly HQ for our Wimbledon finals catch up. Very, very exciting. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Kim.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.